Well, hello and welcome to another episode of In Conversation with Benedict Rogers, an interview series produced by Hong Kong Watch. And this is the first episode of 2023. It's also the first episode of in the Year of the Rabbit, because we're in the middle of celebrating the Lunar New Year. So to viewers, I want to say Gong Hei Fat Choi, Happy New Year. And it's a really great privilege and pleasure to have as our first guest this year, one of Britain's most distinguished lawyers, champions of a champion of human rights and civil liberties, Baroness Kennedy of the Shores, Baroness Helena Kennedy, KC. And if I were to read Baroness Kennedy's entire CV, we would take up several episodes, but I'll just say that she is the director of the International Bar Association's Human Rights Institute, the co-chair of the Inter-Parliamentary Alliance on China with Sir Iain Duncan Smith. She's served as the chair of the British Council, as principal or chancellor of several universities, including president of the School of Oriental and African Studies, where I did my master's degree. And she was appointed to the House of Lords in 1997 and is one of the 7 UK parliamentarians to be sanctioned by China. And she's a passionate friend and defender of Hong Kong. So, Helena Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's lovely to be here, Benedict. And I too want to wish everyone a happy new year. And I have great affection for Hong Kong. And so I wish everyone who's listening so much happiness in this year and fulfillment. And I hope it's a better year.
Thank you. Absolutely. Well, perhaps I could just start by asking when, how, and why you became involved with Hong Kong.
Well, I just mentioned my affection for Hong Kong, and I should say that it started quite early on because I had friends from Hong Kong who studied bar finals with me, and they went back to Hong Kong to practice, but I remained in loose contact with them. And then years later, especially when I became the chair of the British Council, I would travel out to Hong Kong, and we had a number of events there. And at that time, because I was a lawyer, I was particularly interested in maintaining contact with lawyers, and the issues of the rule of law were discussed always when I traveled. And so I had very happy and pleasurable visits and times, met wonderful lawyers and know wonderful lawyers in Hong Kong. But it was always such a fun place to go to. And it was always my chosen stopping off point where I had to go to other places like Australia.
Hmm. You mentioned quite rightly the rule of law. Can you share your assessment of the situation now for the legal profession in Hong Kong? Does Hong Kong really have anything left of the rule of law and judicial independence? And what are the implications of the current situation?
Well, Benedict, I have been a practitioner, believe it or not, for 50 years now at the English Bar. And I of course, became a Queen's Counsel, now King's Counsel. And I did some of the most serious cases imaginable at that time because we were involved ourselves in huge issues of security. We had the Irish Troubles. I defended in many cases involving those charged with offences arising out of the Irish Troubles. We have a strong commitment here to making sure that that people are represented, whatever their political background and so on. The idea is that there has to be due process and that those who are accused must be properly defended. And I've always been a civil liberties lawyer and concerned to protect the civil liberties of people in the United Kingdom. But it's been in recent years that my legal practice has expanded to be much more international. And there is something happening in our world which should concern us, which is that in too many places there is a retreat from the rule of law. But one of the sadnesses for me is to see it in places where the rule of law was sacrosanct. And I think we're forgetting what the rule of law means. So let me just tell you a little bit about the Institute of Human Rights for the International Bar Association. It is sort of quasi-autonomous in that it really deals with the human rights issues, whereas of course, the International Bar Association has lawyers from many different areas of expertise. There are lawyers who are commercial lawyers, and the preponderance of lawyers are commercial lawyers. And of course, Hong Kong is a seat of commerce in the Far East. It is the hub. And so the rule of law is very important to commercial lawyers, and they're looking with a very keen eye on whether they can be confident that the courts are not going to be interfered with by the government of China. And I'm afraid that there is a lot of concern being expressed to the Institute of Human Rights, of which I'm now the director, by lawyers in the international commercial field and their companies, the companies they act for and the companies they advise. And there is worry about whether the rule of law is being eroded in Hong Kong. Now, I, of course, speak to lawyers in Hong Kong and the chair of the Bar Association and so on. And I think there's a bit of kind of willful denial going on. People want to believe that it's all going to fall back into place, that there's been a period of disruption, but it's all going to come good again. Well, I think that that what we know is that the rule of law and civil liberties and the protection of human rights require constant vigilance. And I'm afraid that my antennae are telling me that that we're on a very, very dangerous trajectory with regard to the remit of China, especially in relation to Hong Kong. But I've watched it happening in relation to the citizens of China too. And so over the years, I've been very concerned about human rights abuses in China. And when I started following carefully what was happening to the Uyghur in Xinjiang province, I was deeply concerned. And I should tell you that one of the first things that happened, Benedict, was that when I became the director of the Institute, one of the first letters I received was from a woman, a Uyghur, who was in exile. And it was describing what was happening, what had happened to her, what was happening to her family and to her relatives. And she described the camps that existed in Xinjiang province. And that alerted me to what might be going on. But I mean, I'm a lawyer, I like evidence. And so then I started researching and having my young team of lawyers who are really brilliant start to do some serious work on that. And I'm afraid the story is not a good one. And for those sitting in Hong Kong, it's really important to know that once people start to have power which they abuse, then there's no lens to which they will not expand that abuse of power. And I think that it's happening in relation to Hong Kong now too. So that's what brought me down this road. But also I had friends in Hong Kong, and they would come to London and I would have lunch with them, people who are lawyers, people who are involved in the democratic processes. And so the sad thing is now that because I have spoken out in relation to particularly the China's record in of abusing human rights, because I raised what was happening, which I think is on a trajectory towards genocide of the Uyghur people, because I've spoken out about Hong Kong and the way in which I think that there is an erosion of rights in Hong Kong, I have been put on the sanctions list by China. So it means I can't travel to China and I can't travel to Hong Kong to see my friends there. And actually, more alarming than that is that I feel that I can't even send an email to my friends because I'm worried that having any association with me will put them at risk of being prosecuted under the national security law. And that law itself is a serious signal to the people of Hong Kong that all is not well, and it is a serious and grievous interruption in due process. The idea that it then it passes, as has been decided recently, to the chief executive of Hong Kong can decide who, as a lawyer, can act for certain people who are being prosecuted, is an affront to the rule of law, to the principles which the UN has laid down about the rule of lawyers, about what the rule of law really means. And I remember years ago when I was the chair of the British Council, going to a big state event in China, in Beijing, and with Tony Blair was then the Prime Minister, and a delegation of us, and I remember that business people and so on. And I was there because of the British Council's work in China. And I do remember meeting with lawyers and judges and talking about the rule of law. And it became very clear that we were talking about quite different things. The rule of law in China means we make the rules and you have to follow them. And that's not the rule of law. You need an independent judiciary, and an independent judiciary that is not experiencing that chilling effect where, you know, they ostensibly doing what they've always done, but where they know that there can be consequences. And it starts impacting on behaviours, where they start believing that somehow certain laws are acceptable that they would never have accepted in the past. And the whole business of due process. And law can be a source of liberation, Benedict. I mean, one of the things about law is that it can be a tool that we can use to claim our rights, to succeed in securing justice in certain circumstances. But law can also be a tool to oppress people. It can be the process by which people are being abused and disempowered. And that's the thing that we have to fight against. We have to make sure there's good law, and we have to make sure that there's that we call out law that is being abused. Now, one of the things that happens is that we see in the trajectory of authoritarianism and control and abuse of power, a number of things happen. One is you go after those who criticize government. And you go after them in many different ways, but you go after them. The other thing you do is you really try to close down free media, because free media gives voice to those who might be critics of government, exposing corruption, exposing abuses, and so on. So you go after the media. The other thing you go after is the courts. You go after the lawyers. You go after the judges. And I think I would say to the people of Hong Kong, are any of those things happening in your part of the world?
Absolutely. That's a very sobering and comprehensive analysis of the situation. Given everything that you've just described, including, just to repeat, the fact that now the Chief Executive of Hong Kong can decide who represents defendants, including the fact that you and 6 other UK parliamentarians have been sanctioned, and the fact that a British barrister, a fellow KC, Tim Owen, was denied the opportunity to represent Jimmy Lai in Hong Kong. What's your view of the role of foreign judges in Hong Kong? I mean, it's worth pointing out for listeners that the serving British judges did withdraw last year, but there are still retired judges from the UK, from Canada, Australia, sitting. Should they be continuing to sit in Hong Kong?
The answer that those judges always give is that, well, first of all, by and large, they're not dealing with the cases of national security law or the cases involving people who have spoken out against the powers that be. They're not dealing with civil liberties type of cases. They're usually dealing with commercial cases. And so it's not very different from the arbitrations that they do around the world in the commercial field. And it's mainly judges who have had that sort of commercial law experience who continue to come and sit. And so in some ways, they don't feel this touches upon them, and they're not going to be embroiled in the business of national security law. I would say to them that law is a tapestry, you know, it's the weft and weave of it is that it all comes together. And you can't say, well, I'm sitting, I'm a judge who only deals with, you know, the law of the sea. Therefore, I'm not required to do anything nasty to individual people about individual rights. That's not good enough. Once you see the system itself being infused with a poison, and that's what's happening, then I think that you have to say, am I in some way providing a cosmetic to make respectable that which is not respectable? And so I don't approve of people going there. But I mean, I don't want to say this as someone self-righteous. We've all made mistakes and acted in cases where we've wondered whether it was a good thing or not. But usually my position is you act for everybody. People need to be represented, or you do those cases. I've acted for many people whose politics I have not agreed with at all, but I believe in the importance of people being defended, and I'm doing it for the system, to protect the system, as much as giving voice to the individuals. But I don't think our judges can really say we're not working in the area that is causing alarm. The other thing is the judges in Hong Kong and lawyers in Hong Kong like the idea of foreign judges coming in from Canada or Australia or other common law countries in the UK, and and they persuade the judges that they're doing them a service. They're helping to maintain the rule of law in Hong Kong. But the truth is, I'm afraid there's a delusion taking place about the trajectory that Hong Kong is on. It's only if people really do take a stand and say, this is not law, the law that I qualified in, this is not law that I was educated to respect and to maintain. And when I became a judge, this was not the kind of law and legal system that I was committing to. Hard for people to do that. They've got pensions to think about. They're in their old age. The young ones at the bar, want everything to carry on. It was a very, people in Britain loved the idea of getting a case in Hong Kong or being invited to do something there because, it's a lovely place to spend some time. That is very companionable and collegiate to be with the lawyers there, and it's and you're very well treated and you're very well paid. So who wants not to like? But sometimes you have to put other things ahead of the professional pleasure and challenge that there is in going to do cases somewhere. You have to say, is this the right thing? And I'm afraid I now think that our judges in Britain should not be going out to sit in courts in Hong Kong. And this is not an insult to the people of Hong Kong or to fail them in any way. It's to say, this is how we can come to your protection by saying what's happening is something you don't deserve.
Thank you. You've been particularly outspoken in recent months on the case of Jimmy Lai, who's, of course, served multiple sentences already, still in jail 3 years after he was arrested, and faces his national security law trial later this year. Why, in your view, is his case important, and what more can be done to help him?
Well, first of all, I think that the Jimmy Lai case should be sounding alarm bells to businesses around the world. I mean, the idea that only a few weeks ago, the business of Jimmy Lai was removed from the Stock Exchange of Hong Kong. The presses were seized and put up for sale. There was some sort of fire sale of the presses for his newspapers. All I can say is that, and that was done with no due process, no court case or anything like that. That's what happens in totalitarian regimes, I would have thought that should have been sending alarm bells to business people around the world. And so I say to Hong Kong, this is going to grow, this concern that people have. Can we do business in a place that operates like that? Now, the second thing is that Jimmy Lai, we run inside the Institute of Human Rights for the International Bar Association, we run the Media Freedom Project and a high-level legal panel of lawyers from around the world with expertise in media freedom and media rights. And again, one of the things that happens in places that are, going down the horrible totalitarian route, starts with authoritarianism but ends up with totalitarianism, is that you end up it starts off by trying to close down or capture the media. So of course Hong Kong still has newspapers, but you capture the media that's particularly critical of you, either by basically getting your people to run it or by closing it down. And they've closed down Jimmy Lai, who was a very clear pro-democracy person, is a serious business person. I mean, this is a man who's politically, you know, I mean, he's an engine of capitalism. I mean, he's a success story in terms of capitalism and the things that Hong Kong stands for. Financially, hugely wealthy. But they've gone after him, and let it be a warning to people that nobody is going to be not be at risk. They've gone after him because he was so pro-democracy. And there's a very interesting thing that we've noticed in our analysis of this sort of thing happening in other parts of the world, parts of the world that Hong Kong would not like to be compared with, but is that you in the charging of someone like Jimmy Lai, they've gone after him first of all on fraud cases. And they're nonsensical, you know. In one of them is about, you know, that he was not paying the proper sort of taxation rates for premises because they were not residential, but they were being used for commercial purposes as his office or something. Now, that's the sort of thing that would normally be dealt with by way of some kind. It's a civil matter, or if it had any criminal returns, it would have been dealt with in a very minor sort of way. You pay back the money that is owed because that's what the state's concerned about. But no, the idea is to discredit him in the eyes of the public of Hong Kong before they go after him on the big charge, which is going to be taking place under the National Security Law in September of this year. And this is a man who has serious influence, and I think the world is watching. And I really think this is one of the cases that we have to monitor closely from outside, because it's become totemic of what is possible, and I'm afraid the business world is looking at it very closely, but so is the legal world, the world of law. And we're very concerned about the abuses that are involved in this.
Absolutely. And of course, he's also, it's worth noting, a British citizen. So the UK has a particular responsibility to do more.
You've got to remember that the UK is having serious problems at the moment. The withdrawal from the European Union, that whole Brexit, in my view, catastrophe, because economically it was really not in our own interest to pull away from our nearest neighbours, and of course what it meant was that it means that just now that we're desperately looking around the world for trade, an increase in trading with anybody who will partner with us, and it means that Britain does not want to have a great fallout with China, but at the same time is critical of what China's doing in Hong Kong. But at some point, we're going to reach a Rubicon where we are going to have to say, this goes too far. And this our pursuit of trade, at some point you have to say, do you want to be dancing with the devil? And I'm afraid at the moment, Hong Kong is in the clutch of a very, very dangerous controlling government.
Absolutely. We're coming towards the end of this interview, but I wanted to ask you about the question of Hong Kong lawyers leaving Hong Kong because of the situation, and also UK law firms perhaps pulling out. Can you comment on that, and perhaps also comment on what are the opportunities for Hong Kong lawyers who do leave Hong Kong and come to the UK to practice here?
Well, one of the things, I mean, I already am conscious of lawyers who have got out and who are now trying to sort of, if you like, be called to the English bar or become a solicitor in the UK. And so it does involve further study. But the very fact that lawyers are coming from a common law base and a system that's so close to that we have here gives them a head start. But to tell you the truth, Ben, I have not been able to do the number crunching on this. It's not something that we do inside the institute, and to do that, you would need a serious sort of penetration of the community, the Hong Kong community here. And one of the difficulties that people have is that, you know, we know that the reach of the Chinese government is considerable. And so people often, you know, don't want to be counted and don't want to take part in those sorts of evidence collecting things, because they really have fled from Hong Kong for reasons that are about their analysis of what the future might hold, and their feeling that they have to try and build a different kind of future somewhere else. So they're going to Canada, they're going to the United States, and they're coming to the United Kingdom. And I'm very pleased that the United Kingdom has got a proper system for people to come and settle here. But I haven't got the numbers, but I'm well aware that the numbers are not insignificant, and I'm also aware that law firms here are you know, having meetings to decide, you know, do we continue to do business? How long can we do this? What is our own position with regard to our professional ethics and so forth? So there are serious discussions taking place in the legal world here in the UK about China and Hong Kong.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can I just say that, you know, my heart goes out to my friends in Hong Kong, and by that I mean all the people there. You know, these are very hard times, and it's, you know, I've been recently doing so much reading around, you know, the rise of authoritarian regimes, and it brings home to you how you know, the slide can sometimes be invisible to those who are in it, because they're just basically going about their daily round, and they don't think it's going to happen to them, and they're sort of praying for some kind of miracle that will alter the direction of travel. But all I say is, really be alert and be vigilant and be vocal about wanting to protect the things that matter to you. And the rule of law is one of them, because it's for you and me. I always say to juries here in the United Kingdom, you know, we protect the legal system and the system of justice because we don't know when we might need it for us and for our children or our grandchildren. So be mindful of that, I say to everybody there. Speak out about it. You can't be silent on this, and your voices will be heard by the world, and the world will come in much more loudly if they hear that you yourselves do not want this.
Well, that's an incredibly powerful and important note on which to end. I was going to end by asking if you have a final message, but I think what you just said is the message. So Helena Kennedy, thank you so much for being our guest today.
Well, thank you for inviting me.